crimson thorns. The world, for a time, was perfect. Blocks of gold and emerald lay deep beneath the earth, waiting for the patient hand of a miner. Above, the sun was a perfect golden square, rising and setting with a rhythm you could build a life around. In a village, nestled between a sprawling dark oak forest and a placid river, life followed this rhythm. Our story centers on Elara, an adventurer who had chosen this village as her respite. Her cottage, built of sturdy oak and cobblestone, overlooked the wheat fields where villagers in brown robes tended their crops. Her companion, a loyal wolf with fur the color of ash, was always at her side. She had explored deep caves and scaled sheer cliffs, but here she had found a measure of peace. It began subtly. A single crimson vine, unlike the familiar green ones, was spotted clinging to the trunk of an ancient oak at the forest's edge. It was thin, thorny, and seemed to hum with a strange, internal heat. The villager who found it, a leather worker, simply shrugged and went about his day. It was just a plant. But the next day, there were a dozen more. They snaked up the trees like blood-red veins, and the ground around them had shifted. The familiar green grass was dusted with a fine, crimson powder that crunched underfoot like crushed brick. A strange, fungal smell, earthy and sharp, hung in the air. Elara, returning from a morning of fishing, paused. Her wolf Fang let out a low growl, the fur on his back bristling. The villagers grew uneasy. Shutters that were usually thrown open to greet the morning sun remained closed. The village's iron golem, their stoic protector, patrolled the perimeter with a new, anxious energy, its heavy footsteps a constant thudding drumbeat against the growing silence. The crimson growth was advancing, swallowing the dark oaks and creeping ever closer. The forest, once a source of wood and game, had become a place of dread. The air itself felt heavy, thick, with spores that shimmered like motes of dust in the fading light. Elara knew she couldn't ignore it. This was not a natural phenomenon. This was an invasion. Equipping her finest diamond armor, cyan gleam a stark contrast to the encroaching red, she sharpened her sword and axe. With Fang trotting nervously at her heels, she walked toward the corrupted woods. The moment she stepped under the canopy of crimson leaves, the world changed. The familiar chirping of birds was gone, replaced by an unnerving low hum. The ground was no longer dirt, but a patchwork of netherrack and soul sand that tugged at her boots with every step. Towering, grotesque fungi pulsed with a sickly internal light, casting long, dancing shadows. This was not the Overworld anymore. This was a piece of the Nether, clawing its way into her world. Deeper in, she saw the true danger. A hulking beast with coarse black fur and ivory tusks crashed through the undergrowth. A hoglin. It snorted, its white eyes devoid of reason, and charged. Elara sidestepped, her diamond axe swinging in a clean arc. The beast fell, fading into a puff of smoke and dropping a piece of cooked pork, a bizarre remnant of its fiery home. But another cry echoed through the twisted trees, and then another. They were hunting in packs. For hours, Elara pushed forward, a whirlwind of diamond and iron against the tide of nether-spawned beasts. Fang fought beside her, a blur of gray fur and snapping jaws. They moved as one, a seasoned team against an impossible foe. But the forest was endless, and with every step, the corruption grew denser. Crimson vines, now thick as pythons, writhed on the ground, lashing out to trip her. One wrapped around Fang's leg, and he yelped in pain. Elara severed it with a single furious swing of her sword, her resolve hardening into cold steel. She realized then that this blight had a heart. It was not a random spread. It was a deliberate growth, emanating from a single point. Following the thickest veins of crimson and the strongest thrum of unnatural energy, she fought her way to the forest's core. There, in a cavernous clearing where the sky was blotted out by a ceiling of pulsing nether wart blocks, she found it. It was a grotesque monument of living corruption, a massive, pulsating heart of flesh-like crimson stems and glowing shroom lights, all wrapped around the shattered obsidian frame of a ruined nether portal. The portal wasn't just broken, it was infected. The obsidian wept purple particles, and the heart at its center beat with a slow, sickening rhythm that vibrated through the very stone beneath her feet. This was the source. This was the engine of the decay, and it was not undefended. From the shadows around the heart, figures began to shamble forward. They were not zombies or skeletons. They looked like husks, but their bodies were entwined with the same crimson vines, their eyes glowing with a malevolent magenta light. They were extensions of the heart, its thorny guardians. Elara knew a frontal assault was suicide. She needed a plan. Her mind raced, sifting through years of crafting recipes and survival tactics. Water would evaporate. A sword would barely scratch the surface. She needed something with more power. Something that could shatter the very foundation of this unnatural growth. Her inventory held the answer: cobblestone, gunpowder, sand. Withdrawing to the edge of the clearing, she placed her crafting table down. Her hands moved with practiced speed, her focus absolute. She crafted several blocks of TNT, their familiar blocky shape a small comfort in this alien landscape. The plan was dangerous, a desperate gambit, but it was the only one she had. The battle was a blur of motion and strategy. She would dart in, drawing the attention of the thorny husks, leading them on a chase through the treacherous terrain. Fang would nip at their heels, distracting them just long enough for Elara to find her opening. She dodged slashing vines and charging hoglins, using her bow to pick off guardians from a distance. One by one, she placed the TNT blocks at the base of the obsidian frame, at the key anchor points where the heart's roots dug deepest into the overworld soil. The heart seemed to sense her purpose. The pulsing quickened, and the entire cavern groaned. The ground shook, and new, thicker vines erupted from the soil, trying to ensnare her. She placed the final block of TNT, her breath ragged, her armor battered and scratched. Pulling out her flint and steel, she took one last look at the monstrous beating heart. She thought of the peaceful village, the golden wheat fields, the square sun. With a flick of her wrist, a spark ignited the first fuse. A hiss cut through the air, a countdown to oblivion. She didn't wait. She turned and ran. Fang, come. The words were a silent thought, a bond between adventurer and wolf that needed no sound. She scrambled out of the clearing, the thorny husks right behind her. The hiss of the fuses grew louder, a chorus of imminent destruction. She vaulted over a fallen crimson log just as the world turned white. The explosion was deafening. The ground heaved, throwing her forward. Stone and netherrack rained down from the sky. A wave of pure energy, clean and hot, washed over the forest. When Elara pushed herself up, her ears ringing, she saw the change. The malevolent magenta glow was gone. The pulsating hum had ceased. The crimson vines shriveled, turning black and crumbling into ash. The netherrack ground cracked and faded, revealing the rich, dark soil beneath. Sunlight, real overworld sunlight, pierced the canopy for the first time in what felt like an eternity, bathing the clearing in a warm, hopeful glow. Slowly, cautiously, Elara walked back to the crater. The heart was gone. The portal frame was obliterated. All that remained was a deep scar in the earth and the lingering smell of ozone. The crimson thorns were dead. Her journey back to the village was surreal. The forest was still scarred and twisted, but it was silent. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted. As she emerged from the tree line, she saw the villagers gathered at the edge of the fields. They stood in silence, watching her approach. No one cheered, no one shouted. The ordeal had been too profound for simple celebration. The armorer, a burly man with a soot-stained face, stepped forward. He looked at her battered armor, at the weary wolf at her side, and then at the receding line of corruption behind her. He gave a single solemn nod. It was a gesture of immense gratitude, of respect earned in the face of an unspeakable horror. Elara nodded back, and walked past them toward her small cottage. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the land. The world was safe, but it was not unchanged. Neither was she. As she stood at her doorway, looking out at the horizon, Fang sat at her feet, a steadfast and silent companion. The scar on the land would eventually heal, but the memory of the crimson blight and the knowledge of what horrors could bleed through the cracks between worlds would remain forever.